Welcome to the Erasmus Foundation podcast. My name is Paul Nugent. Are you looking for answers to life and its meaning? Then this may well be the very podcast you need to listen to. In a series of podcasts, we are going to look at the difficult questions of life and apply spiritual knowledge to find out the answers. Hello. Today, we are going to look at the subject, weathering the storm. And with me to discuss this is Corinne, Rosina, and Julia. And we're going to start with Julia, if that's okay. Now, Julia, weathering the storm. What storm are we talking about?
That's a good question. I think that you could look at many areas of life and many events that are happening in our world today, and you could reflect that it is quite a storm. And also, of course, literally, our weather is very stormy. Great extremes, records are being broken. Obviously, the whole subject of climate change is a big topic, and currently this is being discussed between leaders at the moment. But I think really weathering the storm for me is a huge subject because it covers so many different areas of life, whether it's people's health, so all the disease and the pollution, the imbalance within people's minds, the greed that's taken hold. It's having such an effect on people's way of life. The extremes of poverty and wealth. I mean, basically, a lot of the things that we've spoken about in many of our previous podcasts could be talked about as being quite stormy. And we've spoken about this metaphorical storm for many, many years before this time. And we now appreciate that we are really in the middle of it, or certainly in the startings of it. And we believe that this will go on for some more years because the great mind, as I understand it, in his wisdom, has planned for these events and this time because it's perhaps the only way that mankind in greater numbers are going to appreciate what we've done wrong, what we are doing wrong, and perhaps how we change. And maybe the changes won't come till we come more out of the storm and have a time to reflect and think back at what's happened and start to put some healing in place. So I think it is a broad subject, but basically it all reflects the imbalance of our world at the moment.
Thank you, Julia. Now, yeah, very interesting, isn't it? It's hard to put the finger on what the storm is what we're saying, Corinne. So how do you feel about this? What do you think the storm is? Is it something that we should be trying to find shelter from?
Well, the metaphor of a storm is well chosen because generally in nature, when a storm is coming, you can foresee it is coming. And in a way, you could start to get organized to face this storm. Now, according to all the matters Julia has spoken about, it is true that in a way, mankind could prepare now to face the global warming because we know it is coming, and the earth, nature, all creatures have already started to feel its effects. But as we know, it is only the beginning. Now, COVID happened in the year 2020, and we were not really prepared. And perhaps it is a storm we did not see arriving. Mankind has tried to adapt. And so, whatever the circumstances, when a storm is arriving, a financial crash, for example, as we are expecting according to the economic situation, the first thing for mankind is to keep one's eyes open and to face the difficulties that arise, and then perhaps be a little flexible to be able to adjust and perhaps to adapt to a new way of living. And it is, as Julia has said, that mankind can search for solutions to face the difficulties and to go forward perhaps in a better way after having acknowledged perhaps the mistakes that have been done for all the years before.
Lovely. Thank you, Corinne. Now, interesting, Rosina. Julia and Corinne both think that the storm is coming on different fronts, in different areas, and at different times. Now, do you think mankind is ready for these storms?
To be honest, Paul, I think that regardless as to whether man is ready or not, the storms are coming. Many of the storms are happening right now. And I agree very much with what Corinne was saying, how it is important for us in terms of weathering those storms that we are able to adapt. You do need a kind of sense of resilience to be able to actually go through it. And certainly when I look at the news, some of the things that I see on the news that are happening, and this on a daily basis, is quite disturbing. And I have to be selective in how much I actually allow myself to watch. Now, at the same time, I do want to know what is going on because I think it's important. I think if you don't know what is going on, then you are actually unable to protect yourself and others that are around you. And I'm going to give an example of this. I was speaking to a lady who was telling me she had taken her child down to the coast and her child was swimming in the sea. And I said to her, did you check whether the sea was clean? Because there's a lot of sewage that is being pumped into the sea. And I think the sea that she had actually taken her child into was one of the places where near one of the places where they had pumped sewage in. And she said, oh no, she said, I didn't do that. She said, it's perfectly safe. I said, well, actually they are doing that and it's on the news. And she said, oh, well, I don't watch the news. So I did feel that in that instance, by not watching the news, by not being aware of what's going on, she wasn't able to protect herself or her daughter. The other thing that I wanted to say is that in terms of resilience, is that I do feel that if you have a balance within yourself and you have an understanding of the purpose and the reason why these storms are happening, it can give you strength. The storms that we have been through in our lifetimes up to now have built up strength so that we are able to have some resilience. However, I also think that we cannot just weather this storm on our own. We have to be able to work with people. We have to be able to cooperate with people. We have to be able to communicate with people. And I think that this is where having a spiritual awareness and a spiritual understanding of ourselves and others really comes in to its own, because it does give you a sense of purpose, it gives you strength, and the knowledge that we are never given anything that we are not able to deal with or cope with. I think if we have that knowledge, no matter how hard and difficult things are going to get or have already got in our lives, we are able to weather those storms.
Thank you, Rosina. Now, Julia, there's lots of things to think about there. Now, when a storm comes, if you know it's coming, you can prepare for it. Many people out there are probably thinking it's all going to be okay in the end. It's all going to right itself and it's all going to be fine. Now, these are the people that concern me. What about yourself? What do you think about this?
Yes, Paul, I feel that what is going to happen more and more is that people will realize that they have to take a little responsibility themselves. I mean, at the moment, a lot of the news you hear, it's always about putting the blame on someone or a government or a body of some sort. And I think that as things move forward, people, particularly people who are more thinking, will realize they need to take a little bit of control of their own lives, a little bit more responsibility about how they are living their life. And I agree with Rosina. I think also it is important to come together as much as possible, because this will help everybody. We can't be on our own and go through a storm. Everyone has different skills, different strengths. And so I think in order to get through the storm, it is important to come together as much as you can. So also, I think, thinking about responsibility again, getting to know yourself, which Rosina and Corinne have touched on, is so important. It is the basic key that will give you some strength, which will then enable you to adapt a little, and that will show resilience, as we've been speaking about. So it is very much up to people to find a little bit more about what is going on, understand if they can about spirit, and we're trying to help people with this. Because in order to survive, people are going to need their mind, which we say is their spirit. So at the moment, a lot of people are just operating almost with 50% of their energy, if you like. If people realized what they could get by touching and drawing on their spirit, that would give them so much. You know, if they were to meditate, they could get a lot of help about themselves, about decisions, help them with various problems and difficulties they might have as these storms roll in. So I think it is key that people do start to think a little bit more individually, start to question more, talk more about these things amongst people, so that, you know, the example that Rosina gave about the mother with their child not listening to the news, hopefully that will not happen. People will perhaps start to look out, listen, perhaps listen to different people who are speaking a little more logic, people they feel they can trust in their different areas, people like climate scientists, people who know about growing food in a natural way. Anyone that has got good knowledge about nature and food, all of this will be perhaps more important to people, and it might draw more people together to discuss this and to listen. So I think there's a lot of positives that we can mention that will arise because of the storms, because I think people will be forced to. There'll be so much change. It will be quite frightening for people. But, if people do think a little bit more, if they can get to know themselves better and come together with others, then I think surviving the storm will be so much easier for people.
Thank you, Julia. Now, Corinne, we've been told so many times in the past that nothing happens by chance. Everything has a purpose. There's always a reason why things take place. So what do you think the reason is that this is happening to us now?
There is a great plan, a great design made by the great mind for his children, his spirits to learn. And so the spirits, being human spirits at the present time, being on earth, are facing these storms and will be facing even perhaps worse situation in order so that they've got the opportunity to grow stronger spiritually, to learn. Mankind needs to learn by its mistakes. This is the end of the fifth civilization, and mankind has been using more the brain than the mind, generally speaking, and evil has never been so strong as it is on the earth at the present time. So we all need to learn through this experience how we collectively we have let evil become so strong. And it is important as well that we know that we have touched this evil, that we know what evil is, that we can witness how far it can go in the world today. And it is important for us to learn so that we can get stronger and fight evil, and so that it becomes smaller. And then once mankind has gone through all these difficulties, the lessons will be well learned and will be remembered. So all these storms, all these difficulties are in fact gifts offered by the great mind so that we may really learn and progress a great deal through this situation. The great mind has given us the abilities to grow. It is up to us to search inside of us to find our spiritual dimension, because here inside of us there is our spirit, there is our little tiny crystal that is our link with the great mind. And there we may find all the strength and the courage we may need to go through whatever may happen to us in the coming times.
Thank you very much, Corinne. Thank you. Now, Rosina, it all has a purpose. As we've said, and many times it's been said in the past, that nothing happens by chance. So what do you think the outcome of all this is going to be?
We are coming to the end of the fifth civilization, the most evil civilization that has been. And it was allowed by the great mind. It was designed by the great mind for that to happen in order that we may learn, that we may see what evil is, that we may understand what evil is. If you've never experienced something, then you really are not able to understand it fully. And I think that what we are experiencing now, what we're seeing in the world now, is examples of true evil, extreme evil. And I think that many people now are beginning to wake up to this. I think that in the past, people have buried their heads in the sand, pretended that doesn't really exist. And in a way, that's why it was able to flourish. That was why it was able to gain the strength that it has gained. But as Green said, there is a purpose to that. And the purpose is that we may learn. So that when we go in to the sixth civilization, we will go in with a far greater and deeper understanding of spirit, which will enable that sixth civilization to be a far more peaceful one than we've ever known in the past civilizations that we've had. And I think that that's a truly wonderful thing.
Thank you very much, Rosina. Thank you. Now we're coming to the end of our podcast, and I'm wondering whether Adina would like to say a few words before we close.
Yes. Greetings to you all.
Greetings.
Yes. I would simply like to add one thing, and that is in everyone's life, no matter who they are, no matter their age of spirit, the age of their spiritual awakening, spiritual development, in every life upon the earth, there is going to be a time when that person will be tested, will be challenged in some way by life. They are going to go through some difficulties. And those things happen, are presented to that person for them to work through. And by doing this, to help them evolve spiritually. That is their purpose of these things which happen. And if people generally were to understand this, that in spirit we call this a time of a freedom of choice. And it is an important time spiritually within the person's life. But if the person was to know the reason and the purpose for these things to happen, I believe, and I would put it to you, that it would help them manage the difficulties they face. Having that understanding, I have no doubt, would not only benefit them, but help them to work through it.
The Erasmus Foundation is a spiritual teaching and healing foundation based in Laxfield, Suffolk, in the United Kingdom. We have a webpage, www.erasmus-foundation.org. If you would like to be a guest on our podcast, or indeed have further questions for us, then please contact me on paul@erasmus-foundation.org, and we'll do our best to accommodate you. Thank you very much for listening.